Hello guys, Simon Gibson here, checking in. Podcast is Success Won't Come Calling, which is the podcast for people who want to be better tomorrow than they were today. I'm just wandering to our podcast studios to meet with my guest for episode number 5, who is Sian Quipp. Sian is a cognitive hypnotherapist and mental wellness coach. That means that she works with clients in order to make them feel happier, more confident, and better prepared to achieve their goals. Sian's worked with my business, the Inspiring Group, for some time now, and I've received incredible feedback from our staff, many of whom have worked on a one-to-one basis with Sian. I'm looking forward to asking Sian about the techniques she uses in cognitive hypnotherapy, and also about her own experiences with anxiety, which brought her to consider this new treatment and eventually led to that being her business. Of course, Sian is also an entrepreneur. She's grown her own business from scratch. I'm looking forward to asking what challenges she's faced and also how she's looking forward to the future. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Success Won't Come Calling with my guest, Sian Quipp.
Right, superb. Okay, Sian, good to see you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Okay.
How are you?
Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, really well, thanks.
Good, good. So we've got so much to get stuck into. But first of all, we do guest rider on the podcast. We drink what the guest wants.
Yeah.
What have you got us on today?
Yeah, so this is a caipirinha. It's quite strong. It's got cachaça in it. It's from Brazil, and lime and sugar, and ice. So there's no mixer. So go easy on them.
It's very tasty. And it's World Cocktail Day today, you know. Or is it that for you every day?
Know, yeah. That's it.
So what's your association with this drink then? What's your memories of it?
So I went travelling quite a bit in Brazil. I got married in Brazil. It's got lots of nice memories.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's very nice, and cheers. Thanks for coming on our podcast.
Cheers.
Here's to you. So, where do we start? So, you're a coach and you're a cognitive hypnotherapist, and you use those skills to help people with their mental well-being. Tell me first of all, if someone is struggling with anxiety and they want to change their relationship with anxiety, basically, what's the first steps they need to take to begin to address that?
Well, I suppose you'd check in and see what the triggers are, what you're anxious about. It's different for everyone. You have kind of physical symptoms as well as that internal dialogue. So yeah, the first point would be to acknowledge what's going on. A lot of us just try to avoid any uncomfortable feeling. So then so it's not anxiety necessarily that's the problem. It's our response to it. So then that can lead to all kinds of coping behaviours that are actually really unhelpful. Some people might try and numb themselves with drugs or alcohol, or control behaviours that try and keep them safe. And so all these behaviours have a positive intention. They're trying to help you, but actually a feeling of anxiety isn't the problem. It's how you deal with it.
That's really interesting, because I think talking about the problem isn't always helpful, is it? I mean, I think about times in the past when I've felt anxious, and we'll touch upon some of these later. But sometimes it's actually thinking, well, this is what it is. What's the solution? Or what can I try for the solution? I won't kind of stress myself out. Is that the solution to this feeling? But look, if I do this rather than respond that way. So rather than, say, getting angry or frustrated, What about if I try to just pick the phone up to someone and say how I'm feeling? That's kind of a different reaction. That sort of breaks the chain of anxieties. Is that possible?
Yeah, so the first, you could talk to someone professionally or, personally, and it's more about just getting permission to feel what you're feeling. It doesn't have to mean anything. I suppose, when I speak to clients, not only do they have these very uncomfortable feelings that are quite limiting in, say, like work or in personal life, but they have loads of judgment on top of it of what it means to them as a person. It can be quite isolating because, you've got this internal battle that you don't want to say to anyone else. So, the first step would be to share it in some way with someone. And it's not necessarily about the response of someone else, but it's to, acknowledge how you're feeling and to, just take away that stigma of it being a bigger problem than it really is.
Yeah, I can really understand what you mean. Before we get any further into this, let's wind the clock back, because I know you started your career in a different profession, didn't you, when you were a teacher?
Yes, I was a teacher. I used to teach adults how to read and write, so that'd be like native speakers. I also taught ESOL to young people, so they would be like refugees and asylum seekers, and they would need to learn English, to live and to integrate here. But they maybe didn't have literacy in their own language, so they couldn't read or write in their own language. So like learning the skill of that as well as the language was like really challenging. So, I really like breaking things down for people to make it more accessible. And, I love the pastoral side because, people have got, when they're adults and again, they've got like coping strategies for hiding maybe that they can't read or write. So, I really enjoyed that like holistic approach to teaching.
Interesting. So what was the next phase then? What made you stop being a teacher, and what was your introduction to cognitive hypnotherapy?
Yes, so I had anxiety and depression in my 20s. I was functioning pretty well, but it was quite limiting, like internally. And so I tried lots of different things, like the usual like counselling and psychotherapy and energy work and lots of weird and wonderful things. And then I just read something that a cognitive hypnotherapist had written. And I didn't really know the difference between, cognitive hypnotherapy and all the other types of hypnotherapy. But, I liked the way this woman had written this article, and I went to see her. And I actually got my boyfriend at the time, to sit outside and wait because I thought I might be clucking like a chicken or dribbling or not know where I was. So I was so desperate for change, though, that I was willing to go for it. And, it's such a positive experience. It was very hopeful and very different from what I'd had before. And then, it was life-changing, really.
I'm sure. I mean, do you mind me asking you a couple of questions about that period of time?
Yeah.
So you mentioned at the start that when someone is feeling anxious, they have to reflect upon what's triggering that anxiety. What was triggering yours, and how did you go about identifying it and moving forward with it?
Yeah, so it was a mixture really, of past experiences. And again, that like negative narrative of what that meant for me as a person, and failing as a person and having to hide things and not being, authentic in what I was doing. So there was, lots of layers to it in that way.
I've got you. And how did you, once you recognize that, did recognizing it itself make you feel better?
So I felt, I could recognize it. And then I suppose the sessions, the like counseling and talking therapies that I'd had kind of made it stronger because, it was on a Friday. So everyone else would go out after work and I would have my counseling session. So I would go and, talk about these problems without any like tools to really deal with it. So that it was really at the forefront of my mind. So when you just talk about something, it actually, your brain thinks, well, this must be important, so I'll put it at the top of the file.
Right.
But every time, you talk about it or access a particular memory, you've got the opportunity to change it. And that's why hypnotherapy, for me, worked really well because I was actually doing something about it. I wasn't just repeating the same thing over and over again.
I've got you. So you were actually adopting a different strategy to try and move it along rather than just continually turning over in your mind the experiences, the sensations. You were actually adopting a positive strategy of tackling it.
Yeah, so it felt like the triggers and things were just getting stronger because of the amount of attention I was giving it. And so, in that cognitive hypnotherapy session, even just a simple question of, well, how do you want to feel? And I was like, well, the opposite to this. And they're like, well, what would that mean? How do you feel calm, and how do you know where it is, and what would that enable you to do? And it was just questions that I'd never really thought that it was possible to have that solution. I always thought it was just a case of managing the anxiety, having these tricks up your sleeve to be able to cope with it, rather than actually being free of it.
I'm with you. And before you actually trained to become a cognitive hypnotherapist, did you have cognitive hypnotherapy yourself?
Yes, so that was the approach that was really life-changing for me. And then because I had such a positive experience in such a short amount of time, I was like, why doesn't everyone know about this? I came off antidepressants, for example, after a few sessions. I had the confidence to do that. A lot of people around me saw differences. I used some of the techniques for confidence with some of my students, which was really helpful, and people were getting better results in their exams. And so, people were asking me, what am I doing? And then quite a few friends have also trained in cognitive hypnotherapy to use, and, not necessarily to be a therapist, but to use, in business, in their roles as managers and that kind of thing, because they saw such a change, in me and also themselves. So I researched it. There's this school called the Quest Institute in London. That's like cutting edge techniques, really. So it's like a combination of lots of different therapies, but it's evidence-based, which is unique in hypnotherapy. So I knew that, the practical side and the part of my brain that really likes the science and the evidence behind it, really, that really suited me.
And was that where you did your training, was it?
Yes, yeah.
So before you embarked on that training, did there come a point when you were teaching and you thought, I want my life and my career now to head down this other avenue, and I've got to stop being a teacher?
Well, I did love teaching. I didn't necessarily love all the bureaucracy and, the limitations and the hours that brought. And, I really liked the impact it was having. So then as I was, kind of practicing with friends and, other trainee therapists, I thought, this is what I want to do. Like, it was such a buzz to help people in such a meaningful way that I just wasn't getting anywhere else. So even though, I love teaching, I thought, this is what I have to do. This is for me.
Fantastic. So before you trained, did you actually sort of resign as a teacher, or did you keep teaching while you were training?
So I kept, doing both. So that was working evenings and weekends. It's when I qualified. I actually got a room in Harley Street to rent out of a weekend and evening. And then it just came to that breaking point, really, where I couldn't do both things at the same time. And it was that leap of, should I, go for this? This is like a weird profession. Everyone thought, what are you doing? What does even a hypnotherapist, the lifestyle of that look like? And, I'd never had my own business before, but I just thought, I had to do it. So, I just resigned, and everyone thought I was mad to leave something as stable as teaching to go to this unknown, and build your own website and do your own marketing and tell. So not only are you educating people in how hypnotherapy works, but you're showing that you're the person that you can be able to do that. So that was out of my comfort zone. But again, I just thought I have to do it.
It's interesting because, obviously we talk a lot about success. The podcast is about success and failure, and about how we fail and we achieve success, and the characteristics we have to show to get through challenges. And this issue of identifying your goal and going for it, that's a common trait that I'm getting from virtually every guest I've had, that they've had these key life moments when they've been at a crossroads and they've not procrastinated, they've been clear, they've been decisive, and they've gone for it. And it sounds like was that what you did?
Yeah, so I had about £1,000 savings. I handed in my notice. Me and my husband moved away from London to Staffordshire, in this little town where he's from, and all that was really different from London because I was the only hypnotherapist in the town, kind of thing. So it was not only marketing myself like I had done in London, where I'm the therapist of choice. There were like 200 hypnotherapists in that Harley Street building, for example. Number 1 Harley Street, for example. I had to educate people in what cognitive hypnotherapy was, what it wasn't.
Do you mean in terms of your client base in the locality?
Yeah, so that really changed. And so I just had this short period really where I could learn the ropes, and I had this very small buffer of, finances backing me. So I had to make it work. There was no option that, it's not a hobby. I had to just do it and, and tell everyone about it. So I did lots of talks, lots of, on all different subjects and all kinds of venues. And, some people were really responsive and some people didn't want to make eye contact with me in case, I control their mind or something. And I think I just did this scattergun approach of doing everything I could to make it work because I really wanted it to.
I was going to ask you about that because, everything I've seen about your marketing, it looks fantastic. And you're very... I found when I was looking at your marketing materials on YouTube, I love your website. We're going to put your website on our socials so everyone can see them. But you were very front of house. It was you as a person. It wasn't like a list of your qualifications. It was you talking about your experiences, talking about the practicalities of how you work with clients. Is that something which you decided upon early doors that's the way you wanted to grow your business and grow your expertise?
Well, I suppose in person, but marketing in person was always a good conversion because, I had it myself. I could see the benefits. I had, ultimate confidence in the process and the service I was offering. But I suppose I did shy away initially of qualifications or waffly about the process necessarily rather than myself. But then over time and all the courses and as I've grown in confidence as well, you realize that it's me that people are buying because and that is a bit scary sometimes to be your own brand and your own business. But I think it's something that I've really grown with, because you have to really be 2 feet in for self-development when you're in this job. You have to walk your talk, otherwise what's the point? You've got that fraud imposter syndrome, I suppose, so you have to just walk your talk because that it's so beneficial in the end.
And also the fact that you are using yourself, using your personality as a selling point. That must put your clients at ease before they've even seen you, because I'm sure that when they watch your videos online, that they kind of feel like they already know you a bit before they come in and see you.
Yeah, well, that's what I was reflecting on my journey to see someone I hadn't seen before when I was in quite an anxious state, and it's quite nerve-wracking. So because I'd had that experience, I wanted to make sure people were at ease and they could see what my office looked like and who I was and, my background as well. So, to build that rapport, from the start, because that's really important.
That's a really smart move. So $1 million question. Mm-hmm. Tell us all, what is cognitive hypnotherapy? How does it work?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a combination of lots of disciplines really. So, hypnosis, NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, coaching. So it's like the best of all of those models. And it's less about the model and more about the person to suit it to tailor it to. So, the idea is that you hear how someone, because I've seen thousands and thousands of people for anxiety, but everyone does it slightly differently. It's maybe a different reason or reference point in the past that causes that. So, you've just got this like framework, I suppose. Not that the client fits into that framework, but you fit around the client. And, again, that's what I found really useful, and that's what works really well with clients. So it's, a combination of lots of things. And then I am trained in this language pattern called word weaving, which is unique to cognitive hypnotherapy. And that is just based on, like hypnotic suggestions. And again, it's to meet the language that the clients already use. So when we, do a technique and the words weaving at the end, that really strengthens the message so that it's their own way of, so your unconscious mind can accept that more. So it all the umbrella models, all of the approaches are connecting with the unconscious. And that's the part of us that is in control of over 90% of what we do. So it's like our database, in the background that has all our personal experiences, all of our responses. And normally it's fine, using that to predict, a situation. I'll know what to do in a chair. I'll know what to do with the drink because my brain is pattern matching and what's expected. But there are a few things in the background that are out of date, those reference points that our brain is using. So say, like phobias that are completely irrational, or, anxiety about a certain situation, or a belief that you might have about yourself that none of your friends or family can see why you've got that, but you have. So that's where we work. That's what a cognitive hypnotherapist would do, would focus on, what's going on at that level. And that is why, just talking about something doesn't shift that. It's looking at why you think that in the first place and then being able to release it and move on from it.
And you mentioned that in an unconscious state. So when you've understood what the client's issues are, and when you're sort of moving into treatment mode, help mode, are we saying here that the client's in a trance? Are they asleep? Or what's the actual physical aspects of how you treat?
So, it's not like swinging a pocket watch and putting someone under. And I think that's a barrier in a lot of hypnotherapists' work, that the therapist does something special to you and it's a very passive experience. So we go in and out of trance all the time, when we go on autopilot, when, our mind drifts off in a meeting, we go into like a dreamlike state. So it's not a special state. So it can be part of the problem, for example, it can be part of the solution, but it can be, a good place that you can be more open to suggestions. But that's, it's just looking at what is in your database that is causing this glitch or this pattern matching that is unhelpful. So say, for example, someone who's very confident and competent, like crumbles in a presentation situation. So their brain is using an out-of-date reference point really to give them that flood of adrenaline. They might think that they don't know what they're talking about, or they're a failure in some way. So then they try and hide it and, maybe try and avoid doing it. So as a cognitive hypnotherapist, you kind of look at what reference point your brain is using. So that could be, just a bad experience at school. It could be, something that isn't even connected to public speaking, but your brain is matching that and projecting it. So that's why hypnotherapy to change things on that level is very important. Because when you're getting that dump of adrenaline, you can't be you can't be logical. Your brain's in survival mode. So something takes over. So you would say in that instance that someone is in a trance then, so that, you're job is to like de-hypnotize yourself so that you are present and you're with people who are probably pretty polite and able to listen to you, and you don't have to be something that you're not.
It's so interesting. Well, unbelievably, we're already at the end of the first part. We're going to have a very quick break, guys. And I'm back with Sian the other side of half time. And we're going to be talking more about what Sian does to help clients. I'm going to be sharing with Sian some of my experiences of feeling anxious and perhaps what I should have done better to bring the solution more quickly. And of course, I'm really interested to hear what Sian's plans for the future are. So stick with us, guys. Back with Sian, other side of half time.
Hello friends, it's half time. My recommendation this week is Aloha, which is Liverpool's #1 tiki bar. In Old Money, it's a cocktail bar. I posted on Instagram a couple of weeks ago that me and my missus had our first kid-free afternoon out in town for some time, and we had a really enjoyable hour or so sat outside Aloha in Liverpool's really vibrant Baltic market, and we enjoyed it such a lot. The drinks are excellent, very good value for money, and a great ambiance down there, great atmosphere, both with the staff at Aloha and also in and around the Baltic market. So I would really recommend that if you live in Liverpool or are here for a night out, do spend time outside Aloha, because me and Sam really enjoyed it. So another recommendation next week, and now it's back to the podcast with Sian Quipp. It's going really well, isn't it?
Yes. So we left off with you having made this really brave and very entrepreneurial decision that you're going to pursue your career as a cognitive hypnotherapist. I want to come back to what's happened since then. But first of all, what's your views on? Mental health is in the spotlight, isn't it? Because COVID has been a huge strain on almost everyone's sense of well-being to some extent, and I think that the lack of funding for the area, the lack of infrastructure in terms of public health, has really been highlighted from my perspective. What's your views on how, as a society, we approach mental health from sort of childhood onwards?
Yeah, so I think, with the challenges of COVID, everyone's, maybe coping strategies and distractions have been removed. And we're a bit more alone with our thoughts, or, with, say, a lot of people use like busyness as a distraction from uncomfortable feelings. And so without that, things have been brought to the front a bit more. So maybe if you not identify as like, I have a mental health problem, you've still struggled just because you've missed your friends, or you've missed the gym, you've missed like, going out for walks or going away and going on holiday and like taking a break from it all. So I think that's intensified things that were maybe bubbling away in the background. I think anyone who was struggling anyway, that's, like you said, highlighted it even more so. I think there are, lots of options for people who've got mental health issues, or, need some support just in general. And maybe not everything works for everyone, obviously. So say like CBT, for example, is one of the things that you'd be referred to if you went via a GP, and the rates of success with that really are quite low. That's like 30% success. Well, success is in improvement after 6 or more sessions, and that is low. And then people might try that and think, oh well, that's kind of support isn't for me. And then, they might not do anything with it, but it's more about finding the approach that suits you rather than getting help in general isn't for you. So, yeah, I think it's at the forefront because the effect of struggling is so obvious now. There's a big demand for my services, for example. Companies are realising that it's not an option as to whether they invest in mental health for their staff now. It's more like how they do it. You know, it's really changed, you know, in the last year or so that, yeah, it's become more on the agenda because the impact of it is so real to people now.
It is. And I mean, you've worked with all of our businesses for a year or so now. And just for everyone's benefit, what Sian does throughout the Spiring Group is that she works on a one-to-one basis with any of our team who want to work with her. We don't require that a member of a team comes through HR. We don't require that they get any sort of authority to approach you, or they have to tell us what they want to talk to you about, or that it has to be work related. We've just decided that the mental well-being of our staff is so important that we can't afford not to prioritize it and invest in it. And it's consistent with our values. It's consistent with the ethos and the culture of the business. But I must admit, the reason I'm so delighted the way it's worked out is because when we discussed the idea of bringing you on board, I was totally persuaded that it was a very positive thing to do. The only thing that worried me was the uptake. I thought to myself, are people going to think, oh, I'm not going through, I'm not having anything to do with work. I'm worried that this is somehow going to come back to haunt me, etc. Now, because that's not the case, then that's obviously helped. But have you found people to be quite open and engaging and positive when they've contacted you?
Yeah, so I think, you know, the engagement is high, and that just shows, you know, how much of a need there is. I think for businesses, they can see the return on investment, you know, so it's not just a nice thing to do, but it helps, you know, with all kinds of aspects of their business, with engagement and productivity and retention rates, because employees feel valued. And I think because it's a confidential service, that it's separate from the company really, that they can just, you know, access that support in private and know that, yeah, there's no repercussions of them struggling or needing a little bit of extra support. And then, you know, the employees are happy because they feel valued and supported. And, you know, all of them is accepted, you know, all parts of them. And then they can see the benefits of that. But also, you know, from a company perspective, they can see the direct benefits of that.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've got lots of business owners and lots of entrepreneurs who listen to the podcast. And just to, if anyone wants to contact me directly just to talk about the benefits we've found in working with Sian, please do. I mean, just to share with you, our business hasn't suffered because of COVID. In terms of our financial performance, we've grown our productivity, we've grown our market share. And that really is all down to our team. And because if they hadn't responded as positively as they have to what's been a really difficult year in terms of asking them to adapt their working practices, some people without maybe ideal working environments at home. I mean, obviously we've helped them with that in certain respects, but I really would tell everyone that working with Sian has been a real added value. And I do think you mentioned return on investment. This isn't just about some conceptual idea of well-being. This is about supporting your team to get them to be the best they can be. And you've definitely added value with us. So I would recommend Sian, and I would recommend, the other point I would make is that businesses, because of COVID, some of them are going to be making savings on their business expenses. There's talk of obviously hybrid working practices, maybe part of the week in the office, part of the week at home. We hear about people downsizing office space. Now that comes with a considerable saving. What I would say to businesses in that situation is don't overlook the social and the therapeutic element of people working together. And if that's reducing I would say you neglect your team's mental well-being at your peril, and you will ultimately feel that in the bottom line of the business unless you direct some of your savings to appropriate professionals to work with the team and support them. Is that kind of what you tell business clients?
Yes, a lot of the time, they just see that feedback as well, in, like I said, in what they save. So it's not just, mental health or sick days that they're saving. It's the whole culture of the place, and that development as a team and as a unit. So there's like fewer disruptions. But I think with all the changes going on, people realize that the support has to come from within. And like, if you have something in-house, then that, you can ensure the quality of it, and you can ensure, the uptake of it too.
And do you, when you're talking to businesses on this basis, do you ever get any, do you ever feel any resistance to the principle of working with you? Or do you find more businesses are thinking, this is the right thing to do to support the team?
I think businesses, it's a mixed reaction really. So they probably know that it's the right thing to do. I think they're just wondering how it fits into their culture. I think, say wellbeing or, like decompressing after a hard work day, there are quite out of date practices. Maybe everyone will go out and get pissed together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or, play golf or something. And I think with a modern workforce, that doesn't really suit them. It depending on the sector, I mainly work with like professional services, so it's all about people, so they do understand the impact of having this like coaching and in-house support, because their relationships with people are all based on their well-being, and they can see that domino effect of that. I think in some businesses, they have that culture where maybe higher up, the people who've worked there the longest, or maybe the partners haven't had that support, and they did it and they've done okay. But like I said, it's very attractive for a modern workforce now to know that they're valued, and to know like long term that they can see a future in that company.
Yeah, and if this is part of the new normal, as it's being called, that businesses prioritise, they get on the front foot in terms of supporting the team, and I think that's a real positive to come out of the last year. Let me just ask you, we talked a little before about sort of how someone who's at the start of their decision that they want to change their relationship with anxiety, or with lack of confidence, or any other area that's holding them back. I used to, up until about the last few years, I used to get really anxious in terms of the business. It was sort of a bit different to what we were talking about earlier. My problem was this: I was setting myself and others unrealistically high standards, and I was reacting badly when there was any sort of deviation from the roadmap. I was catastrophizing. I was being unrealistic in terms of my expectations of myself and others. That was manifesting itself in sort of frustration and rumination. And although it was all business related, it was definitely starting to spill into home, into my relationship with my mates. It was quite often said, you'd be sitting in the pub having a pint, and so I say, "What is it with you? You're not here. You're not present. What's up with you?" Is that something you've encountered before?
Yeah, I think people get a lot of self-esteem from work, and their strategies for building the confidence, I suppose, is to become successful and have something measurable that they can control, and you put more effort in, and then you normally get more successful results. And I think if that doesn't happen, then that does make you question your own confidence and your own worth. And I think it's in hindsight, separating yourself from those external targets can be more helpful, so that you get out of your way a bit more, and you can approach things in a bit more creatively. But also, having downtime and looking after yourself so that you are present with your friends. So then you fill your cup a bit more. So then you can approach something in a different way. I think that's a really common thing. And I think it's really helpful, that you share that, because it gives other people permission to have their own experiences too. And it doesn't necessarily, it's something that you can learn from. It doesn't necessarily stop you from being successful in that way. It just makes the journey a bit more pleasant when you've got more of a balance and a way of looking after yourself.
I couldn't really improve on that. I mean, as time went on, I wish I'd probably come to see someone like yourself, Sian. But I mean, I just formed a view that, well, all this beating myself up and beating other people up and setting high expectations, and then if we did something in 6 months rather than 4 months, I was viewing it as the end of the world and giving myself and everyone else a hard time. I kind of just, the way I sort of self-treated was to think myself, well, what is that really that bad? Is that really so awful? What's the worst that can happen if you set yourself a target of 6 months and it takes 12 months? Is that actually that bad? So I almost developed a devil's advocate in my mind, where my starting position was, what? It's taken us 12 months. That's just far too long. But then I got to a point where the devil's advocate was saying, well, why? Why are you kind of making that such a big deal? Is your life really any worse because you've not done quite as well? It's not, is it? And in fact, if you listen to me rather than the other fella, your life's probably going to be better. And also it's better than that, because if we get there in 12 months rather than 6 months, we might be in a better position when we get there. So there's positives as well as that. Was I on the right lines there, do you think?
Yeah, I'm wondering what helped you change that perspective then.
I think it was like a weariness. I reached the point where I thought to myself, because there were certain occasions when I was being unfair to myself and to other people in the business who I really liked and who I really respected. And I think it came a point where I just got weary of feeling like that. And I thought to myself, well, what is the alternative? I suppose the positive was that I was able to find that alternative, which was basically, it was almost a what's the worst that can happen type approach, and then when I took that approach for a little while, all of a sudden, this probably started about 5 years ago or something, all of a sudden, not only was I noticing that things weren't as bad as I thought they were getting better. So the people I was giving a bit of a hard time to, all of a sudden, I saw them starting to come into their own, and they started to blossom. They started to take more initiative. They started to be more positive themselves. And I thought, well, I'm leader of the group. I'm leader of the businesses. And I think the fact that I'm addressing my thought process and behaviours probably has contributed to those positive outcomes. But even if they haven't, then it's helping me. So it was a weariness combined, I think, with that devil's advocate rationalist who was sort of saying, you don't want to be like this. So let's find another way. So I feel quite fortunate that I had that other fella on my shoulder who was a nice guy. Have you come across something like that before? Or am I a bit of a nutcase?
Yeah. So again, I think that's really common that we put lots of pressure that's not external. We put it on ourselves, and the good news is that we can change that quite quickly. And you're right, that you having that positive change will have a ripple effect on people around you. So that's, again, that positive feedback that you can see, well, this strategy is working for me and others. So then you obviously, adopt that more fully. I think, I talk a lot about self-compassion. There's a lot of science behind self-compassion. There's really interesting psychologist who, is pioneering this research. And again, it's not just a nice thing to do. It can give you lots of tangible results. and you think, you wanted to reach those targets for a reason, for the benefit of the business and, to bring success to you and your colleagues. But if you think of, why you're doing that and what your actual priorities are, being burnt out and stressed out and not enjoying the journey, like what is the point of that? And I think the more I've been reading and, hearing, I work with a lot of successful people, and they get to a point, like you, that maybe they're just, they've got this like fork in the road of, I can carry on and not change anything. And what is the result I'm going to get? Or I've got this opportunity to approach things differently. And I think, just having that thought of what if this could be easier than I thought, or what if there's a lesson here that is so important that I need to learn it now to change, and so you could get what you want, but maybe not necessarily in the way that you thought, is really life affirming. And then, you can enjoy that process rather than just the destination.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you were talking then, other things came to my mind in terms of how I dealt with it. And it was interesting because I think you mentioned kind of the realization of why you're doing this. That was definitely part of it. Because quite often when I was placing huge pressure on myself and others, it was to reach financial targets. And obviously as chief executive, that's my job to a large extent. But it's not the only part of my job. And I guess there came a point where I sat down and thought, well, is this all there is for you? Is this that important that you make more money and that sort of thing? And when I concluded that, no, that's not what gets me out of bed. What gets me out of bed is I want to enjoy my life. And since I've sort of recognized that, the business has performed better financially than it ever did before. And it's because, like you said, of that ripple effect. It's because sometimes fixating upon success and beating yourself up and that sort of thing, it brings negative behaviors because it brings anxiety to those that you're leading. It breeds paranoia. It breeds unpositive, negative pressure. And that, what I would say to anyone who's sort of experiencing that severe self-criticism is that there's very little good about it. There's very little which will help you move forward if you keep criticizing yourself. And I definitely think if I had my time over, I definitely would have come and seen you before then. And that's what I'd recommend. Is that something you've seen, that sort of self-criticism?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that that's a huge motivator, that kind of stick approach, like the carrot and the stick, if they beat themselves up and they move away from failing and they go towards targets or they reach a certain level and then I'll be happy, is really hard to just live every day like that. I talk a lot with clients about abundance mindset. So, and scarcity, being the opposite of that. So if you've got this scarcity of something that has to happen, and the lack, of that you would experience if you don't get there is very limiting. So then you're more risk averse, maybe that's what your business needs, and then you wouldn't make those decisions. Whereas, feeling more abundant, like we will get there, we're all capable, more resourceful, and therefore more creative in how you approach things. And that does lead to success. So it's sometimes counterintuitive that, taking the pressure off will lead to bigger and better results. But, I've seen it, time over, that does really work.
Yeah, it does. So I want to just finish off by talking about your future, about how you're viewing the future for your business. And so I guess COVID has opened up certain doors for you in terms of you've been working a lot more remotely, which opens up, being able to expand your business more geographically, perhaps internationally. I think that physical presence is less of a barrier. So what are your plans for your business for the future?
Yeah, so I've expanded my business. There's a team of us that we're all, coaches and cognitive hypnotherapists. We've all got, great rapport. We've all got different backgrounds that brings a more like comprehensive approach and variety as well to the companies who we work with. That geographical limitation isn't the case anymore. So we work across the country with different businesses. We do one-to-one support. We do regular like mindfulness sessions, which, give people the tools to create more work-life balance, which is obviously really helpful. We do regular stress management and confidence workshops, which have got really good feedback. Again, it's just more about that education piece and giving people the tools. And then if people do need extra support, we would do one-to-one sessions too.
And are you keen to work with both individuals and businesses? Are you hoping to maintain that diversity?
Yeah, I do that, both of those things at the moment. I'm really passionate about having a big impact. And I think working with companies helps that, because then you can see, larger numbers of people and have that that real impact and culture change within a company, which is really satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned impact. You've definitely made a big impact on our business, and you've made a big impact on the podcast as well. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And we're going to have Sian's website and her own social media channels on the podcast socials. I would recommend, if anyone's listening to this podcast and they feel they're in a tough place, like, I mean, I think I probably was 5 years or so ago. I would recommend that they didn't do what I did and sort of self-treat. I'd suggest that they reach out to Sian, and particularly if you're a business owner who's listening to this, don't underestimate the positive impact that investing in your team's mental well-being can have upon the ethos and culture of your company, and also upon your bottom line, because we've seen the benefit of that, and I'm the biggest advocate. And you've done a fantastic job, and you've been a fantastic guest, Sian.
Thank you.
We'd really love
me.
You're very welcome. We'd really love if Sian came back and see us sometime, wouldn't we? But in the meantime, thank you for the cocktail. It's been lovely having a drink with you. It's been so interesting. And it's Sian Quipp, everyone.
Yeah, so we've had Sian Quipp as our guest. I found her amazing, to be honest. Knowing Sian anyway, because I actually undergo sessions with her. She's personally helped me massively throughout this lockdown, especially with some of her techniques. How did you feel about some of the techniques? Do you feel like that's something that you can apply in your own personal life?
Yes, it is. What I really liked about talking to Sian was that she was extremely practical and very sympathetic to the fact that when we're not in a great position, when we're not feeling our best, when we're feeling down, that making those first initial steps forward can be the most difficult.
Yeah.
And I thought that the way Sian described getting to whatever is triggering those feelings of negativity was very helpful. Because you'd shared with me that you're working with Sian, and because obviously Sian works with all of the staff in our group,
Yeah.
and I've had other team members contact me to talk about working with her, I already had great confidence in her quality. But as well, the thing which I think many people would find daunting about seeking help and seeking support for issues with mental well-being is it feels quite faceless.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like you're just knocking on a door in a big medical building and you don't know the people. And Sian, the way she presents both as a person and also through a website and the way she markets her business, I think that takes that anxiety out of it, because she's a great person as well.
Oh, definitely. I think I really enjoyed hearing about the fact that she started a business with only £1,000 in a bank, and then she had no option but to make it work. That was inspiring for me, because I've been there myself, and to have £1,000 and know you've got no fallback, it's stressful, and some people would shy away from that. So it's fantastic to hear that she's just an average person, normal, and she started this business and she's absolutely flying at the moment. So.
Well, that's right. And I mean, that was the interest, because I could have gone on with Sian all night, because you have got these two aspects of her being an expert in an area which can help people achieve their goals through getting themselves feeling better, supporting their mental well-being. But you've also got the fact she's an entrepreneur, and that she's built a business in a tough sector from the ground up.
And I was so pleased that we were able to spend a bit of time with talking about the challenges that she's faced, about the personal sacrifice she's had to make and the investments she's had to make. And I think she's done tremendously well, both as a cognitive hypnotherapist, but also as an entrepreneur and a business owner.
Oh, no, most definitely. Now, every week we have a guest rider, and Sian's special cocktail was fantastic and provided by the Berry and Rye. How did you feel about that?
Well, first of all, I'm not just saying this. Berry and Rye and Aloha, which they also own here in Liverpool, are two of my favourite bars in the city. So I'm so grateful to them for providing the drinks. The lovely thing so far, I mean, the reason we do Guest Rider on the podcast is because when we're relaxing and we're having a nice chat, we have a drink, don't we? Not just an alcoholic drink. We say, do you want to meet for a coffee? Mm-hmm. We say, do you want to put the kettle on? Yeah. And sometimes we say, do you want to go for a pint or a glass of wine? And I really enjoyed having a cocktail with Sian. What's nice is that so far on Success Won't Come Calling, we've had 50% alcoholic drinks and 50% not. And whatever it is, I always enjoy having a drink and a chat with people, and I certainly did with Sian.
Yeah, lovely stuff.
Excellent. Okay, guys, that's all we got time for from me and Stacey. Sian Quipp was our guest today on Success Won't Come Calling. We've had another great episode. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. See you next time on Success Won't Come Calling, which is the podcast for people who want to be better tomorrow than they were today.